Here we go. So I like to say that there's nobody who roasts me better than my Lacey mom. She roasts me harder than the street vendors roast corn on the cob in India. And one day I was talking to my mom about the clothes I wear, and she proceeded to tell me that in all the photos I sent her, I'm wearing fewer clothes than my friends are. Boom, roasted. She doesn't even have to try. It's quite literally effortless for her. And I'm pre-med, so one of my mom's regulars is, with the way that you spend money, you have to become a doctor to afford your own lifestyle. Your dad and I will never be able to retire. And at that point, I was no better than a burnt piece of corn. But good thing I enjoy corn on the cob. And nothing is spared in my life that my mom roasts, especially not my love life. And I found out that getting humbled by your Lacey mother is a universal experience, and I've seen my friends be checked in the same way. It's this level of sass that is one of the hundreds of reasons that I love my Lacey mother. Last year I talked about my dad and how amazing he is for 15 minutes while giving my mom an honorable shout out for about 2 minutes. And that's really not fair to her, considering that as a 5-foot woman, she gave birth to me, an 8-pound, 12-ounce baby, through C-section and a week late at that. So it turns out I also understood Indian Standard Time as a fetus. So this year I stand in front of you to talk about the incredible Lacey women in my life and the level of admiration that I have for them. Not just for their abilities to exploit my weaknesses, and to discuss the level of admiration I have for them, but also to talk about my own personal roller coaster of a journey that I am still very much on to establish my confidence as a brown woman. So to understand my mother, we need to begin with my grandmother, or Ajji as I like to call her, Shantamani Jayaprakash. Shanti was the first woman in her family to obtain a college degree. She majored in English with a minor in history. And at age 19, my grandmother got married to my grandfather, and being the young, beautiful people that they were, these two were completely smitten with one another. I've heard from various sources, and I can clearly say from that picture alone, that these two were a very good-looking couple. My Ajji decided early on to stop her full-time job at her office and instead commit to a different job that was not just full-time, but instead literally around the clock. It was being a stay-at-home wife and a mother. Asha Deshpande, my mother, was born on April 25th, 1974. I will in fact face the wrath of my mother for basically saying her age right now. There goes my chance at buying a new pair of heels. Anyways, 4 years later, my uncle was born. In addition to her 2 children and husband, who, God bless my grandpa's soul, he does act like a child sometimes, my Ajji also took care of her 2 brother-in-laws and mother-in-law. My tata would go on weekly work trips and was out of town most of the time, so my Ajji was single-handedly responsible for running her household and ensuring that everything was ordered and everyone was taken care of. My mummy recalls my Ajji being a moderately strict mother, and honestly, looking back on it, I do understand why. She was younger than me when she had her first child, and by around my age, she was completely running her own household. The amount of stress, pressure, and exhaustion that my grandmother felt, I can't even begin to fathom. I complain about my days because my feet hurt in the $150 hokas that I've had after I've had to stand in my lab for 2 hours, but my grandmother, on the other hand, has cracked feet because of how hard she's worked throughout her life, and is working around the house for upwards of 16 hours a day, praying for at least 4 hours and sleeping less than 4 hours a night. Not for herself, but all for her family. Never once has she uttered a word of complaint, and she selflessly continues to do what she does with the utmost amount of affection, because she would do anything for her family, even if it means working herself to the bone. My admiration for my grandmother cannot be expressed by words. In my life, she has taken on the role of 2 grandmothers for me, because my paternal grandmother passed away before I was born. My maternal Ajji lived with us for the first year of my life to help raise me, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that my paternal Ajji also worked tirelessly during her lifetime to take care of her 6 children and husband from a very young age. While I don't want to glorify how much my Ajji sacrificed and how hard they've worked as housewives and mothers, I do want to acknowledge everything that they've done for their families. The legacy of these women will continue through me, and that in itself is a great honor for me to carry, to be descendants of my strong, independent, badass Ajjis. So now, let me introduce my mummy, or as I sometimes refer to her as Asha. I do get in big trouble for calling her by her first name though, so. This is a Desi household. I am kept in check. If I walk inside my house for like 2 steps with my shoes on, my dad does say something. So my mummy is a trailblazer in her family. She obtained her undergrad degree and first master's degree in India. Then, after having countless marriage offers being flung at her for months, she decided to marry my dad within 3 hours of meeting him. And her reasoning for saying yes to my dad was that he didn't make her feel icky. So the bar really clearly is really high. It's really romantic, I know, but my parents just celebrated 25 years of their marriage. And thank God my dad didn't give her the ick, because here I am, standing in front of you, perfection. Honestly, my mom is so iconic. Like, genuinely, she was her when she was in college. And here I am, barely able to get a man to hold eye contact with me. So I might genuinely need lessons from Asha. Anyway, so she immigrated to the United States, where she tried being a housewife for a couple months and decided that that wasn't fulfilling enough for her. So she studied for the GRE and began her second master's degree. My mom was literally pregnant with me when she was doing her master's degree, and after completing her master's degree, you can see like a picture of me and her right over here, where she's holding me during her graduation. My parents were in the same class, and because my dad is a silly man, he didn't want them to sit next to each other. So he was probably worried about getting distracted by my mom during class, and honestly for good reason, because he ended up dropping his MBA degree anyways, but he does have a PhD, so it's fine. My mom's belly was so large when she was doing her PhD because I was a chonky child that my dad had to help her get out of her desk at the end of class. So she really is the OG baddie. And at the end of her degree, she graduated with a master's in something even better. Me. Duh. And my mummy began working right away and has been working for about 2 decades now. So I am on FaceTime with her right now, and she's literally working while I'm on FaceTime. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, you can see her working right now. Yeah. So she's a data scientist, and I'm beyond proud of my mother. So she's a data scientist by trade, and now she does very little of that. I'm not completely sure exactly what she does, but I do know it's a lot of meeting with people and a lot of girl bossing. She's so busy that I've tried to call her during the day 8 separate times this week to talk to her about something, and she has not answered like a single time because she's in meetings the whole time. Truly though, like, what is she doing that's more important than being my mom? Like, why is she not answering my phone calls? But the fact of the matter is that she's working so that she can afford our outrageously expensive USC tuition. So as my mother's daughter, I can confirm that she's had to deal with a lot. As in a lot. Apart from being almost a week late when I was born and requiring a C-section because I refused to come out, I stuck a rock up my nose, and then I ran down a main street away from my parents all before the age of 3, so I was a handful. Honestly, with how fast I was running down that main street though, you would think that I'd become the next Usain Bolt, but unfortunately that was when my running career peaked at age 2. I have always been sassy and stubborn and strong-willed, and my parents often bear the brunt of my personality. And who do I owe these characteristics to? Well, if you ask my dad, he'd say my mom, and if you ask my mom, he'd say my dad. But honestly, they're both as much of a problem as I am. My mom has raised me to speak my mind, which occasionally does get me in trouble, stand my ground, and be confident in who I am. Being a woman of color in a corporate world, my mom is incredibly fierce, and honestly, always has been. When I was little, she'd give me this look that I referred to as the death stare whenever I did something wrong, and it would absolutely stop me in my tracks. My life would literally flash before my eyes. So my mom is a wife who cooks fresh food almost daily. Don't worry, my dad does the dishes, he's very useful, I promise. She's a caring daughter who ensures her parents' needs are met, and an absolute girl boss data scientist who has established herself in every company she's worked for. But above all, she's a mother who puts her daughter's happiness and comfort above her own. My mummy has her flaws, unlike me. Just kidding. She has no flaws and I have lots of them. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't fight with my mom. Literally 3 days ago, I ended the call with her less than like 3 minutes into the call because I got so frustrated. But bless my mother's heart, because she did not get upset with me, and instead she dealt with my frustrations calmly when I proceeded to send her a very passive-aggressive text about 20 minutes later. One day my mom told me that taking care of me is like having 5 children in one. I personally choose to believe that I'm an only child because I was perfection, not because I was a lot to handle, but I am pretty delusional, so that also might be a problem. While I love everything about my mom, maybe not everything, but my favorite thing about my mummy is that as soon as I complain about someone, she's ready to go to war for me. And now that I'm old enough that I need to fight my own battles, my mummy is basically like my commander-in-chief. She always encourages me to speak my mind and stand my ground. And this is a critical trait in anybody. So now we get to the best part of the story, me. So Anusha Murli Deshpande was born on Sunday, May 25th, 2003 at 6:52 p.m. at Bryan LGH Hospital, the west side, which in my opinion is the best side, in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is basically the middle of nowhere. We already know that I was a handful of a child and continue to be now that I'm technically an adult. And I had a great childhood. Except for puberty, that's rough for everybody. Thank God for puberty or else I'd still look like middle school Anusha though. But little Anusha can be summarized by 3 words. Pink, animals, and Disney Channel. And honestly, big Anusha can also be summarized by those 3 words. I was spicy from a young age, so I had no hesitation telling everybody in Nebraska that hunting was wrong because I loved animals so much. That did go over very well in my state. And I also had no issue talking back to my parents, but don't worry, they humbled me quickly. I was very fortunate to live in the same house in Omaha for most of my life, which meant I formed friendships from a young age that have lasted around a decade. In fact, I have a matching tattoo with my best friend of 16 years. That picture's right there. Yeah, I'm really surprised that my Desi parents agreed to me getting a tattoo because every time I come home, my mom literally counts the amount of piercings I have on my ears to make sure that I didn't get more. She's really not going to be happy when she finds out that I want a belly button piercing. She's literally shaking her head right now on FaceTime. My grandma specifically told me, she goes, don't get your navel or your teeth pierced. She's talking about your tits. So that's going to be a disappointment to my grandma as well. But I recognize and acknowledge that I have lived a very privileged life, and I'm incredibly grateful for the life I have and continue to have. Despite the transition to college being very difficult at first, I now love my life here at USC, and 3 years ago, I never would have imagined that my life here would be this full. The people I've gotten close to here, it felt like they were always meant to be a part of my life. And there is nothing in this universe that matters as much to me as my loved ones do. And they have shaped and continue to mold me into who I am today. So whether I realize it or not, throughout the last 21 years of my life, I have been on a journey of defining what brown femininity means to me and how to develop confidence in an environment that often tears me and women that look like me down. All it takes is looking at the comment section of a TikTok featuring a beautiful young Desi woman with a bit more body hair than Eurocentric standards agree to, or facial features that don't adhere to white-centered beauty ideals, to see that Desi women are absolutely torn to shreds and consistently told that they are ugly. Growing up as a brown woman in the United States has been a unique experience full of its triumphs and difficulties. I was born and raised in Nebraska and spent 18 years of my life living in that state, with white neighbors, attending a primarily white school, and without realizing it, I had begun to internalize white standards of beauty. I wanted nothing more than to look like the white girls at my school with their long, straight blonde hair, because to me, I thought that was the only way that I could be beautiful. No matter how many times my mother or grandmother or the other women in our moderately sized Desi community in Omaha told me that I was beautiful, I had a hard time believing that I was as beautiful as the white girls that I went to school with. And now the white girls I was idolizing were absolutely stunning, and they should feel very beautiful. But I had a difficult time coming to terms with the fact that I should also feel pretty. Whether it was my hairy arms, or the facial hair on my face, which small flex, I could grow facial hair better than most of the brown boys at my school, so who's laughing now? My big nose, which I ended up getting pierced and is very characteristic of my dad's side of the family. My curly hair, with which I have a love-hate tumultuous relationship with. Honestly, taking care of my curls should classify as a part-time job because it's so much work. Or my forehead, which I can call a 5-head. or my large legs, I have had no trouble identifying aspects of my appearance to be insecure about. I want to recognize that I am speaking from a point of privilege because there are many aspects of me that do fit the beauty standards, and I do inherently benefit from those parts of myself. But I go on this rant because now, at 20 years old, I'm recognizing the impact that my Eurocentric internalized beauty standards have had on me. And I'm having to unlearn this mindset day by day. I'm trying to make more deliberate efforts to encourage the young brown girls in my life to develop their confidence. And for the little girls who I consider to be like my sisters back home and who look up to me, I will always tell them that they're gorgeous. Because in a state where they will inevitably face a racist comment about the way that they look, I want them to know that they are perfect just the way that they are. A society that develops insecurities in young girls and preys on these insecurities to make these girls feel less than and continue to feel so throughout their life is a society that is truly pathetic. It's so easy for us to tear other women down internally because we ourselves are feeling insecure, and I for one am absolutely guilty of this. However, as my mom reminded me the other day, everyone is beautiful in their own way, which brings me back to the story of the amazing women in my life. As I continue to figure out who I want to be and gain confidence in myself, I know that my mother and my grandmother, and my dad of course, but he had a spotlight last year, will always be there to guide me. I once had my high school teacher lovingly call me a boss bitch, and honestly that's exactly who I aspire to be, a kind boss bitch. Just hope you're not on the receiving end of the bitch part. I'm gonna get in so much trouble for cursing with my parents though. They're not gonna be able to send this video to anybody. I want to be a doctor and at the moment, a trauma surgeon, so I hope to be involved with some kind of healthcare policy one day as well. I want to treat my future patients and their families with kindness, and I want to help combat the social disparities we have in healthcare. I know that this path requires both resilience and compassion, and eventually, I would also like to become a wife and mother. It'll be a long road to achieving my dreams, but I'm not afraid, because the incredible Desi women in my life will be there to support me. I said this last year and I'll say it again, proudly and without any hesitation, the greatest blessing in my life is having the family that I have, specifically my parents and my grandparents. The strength, resilience, and badassness of my mom and my Edgies lives on through me today. The amount that they exert themselves physically and emotionally can be seen by the cracks that they have on their feet. I truly cannot wrap my head around how many sacrifices these women have made for their families, and specifically for me. There's no amount of gratitude that I show that will ever be enough to truly say thank you, and these women are the epitome of compassion, selflessness, bravery, and courage. And I'm honored that I get to carry on their legacy. As the saying goes, strong women raise strong women. I also get to carry on the legacy of falling asleep really easily though. It runs on my mom's side of the family. So it's really embarrassing when I fall asleep on the bus ride back from CAC with my mouth open. We actually I don't think we have narcolepsy. It's just, I just blame my genetics for it. But today, I stand here as the daughter of Asha Jayaprakash, the granddaughter of Anusuya Joyce and Shanthamani Puttuswamy. I quite literally owe my name to my grandmothers because my name Anusha is a combination of Anusuya and Shanti. I am the product of generations of powerful, unstoppable women who have each contributed to the young women I am today. Women who have faced unimaginable barriers, endured levels of sexism I will never be able to understand, and women who sacrifice everything, including their personal dreams, to support their families. Every single woman in my family makes me inexpressibly proud, and it is an honor for me to stand here in Los Angeles, California, on April 12, 2024, a testament to the women before me and the women who will come after me. So I stand here today as my beautiful self, Anusha Murli Deshpande, brown and beautiful.